Robby, what's on your radar?
So in my radar yesterday, I noted the New York Times' quite excellent editorial on America's free speech crisis and how cancel culture is shutting down important conversations, making people feel afraid to express perfectly normal, perfectly legitimate opinions. Both the right and left are to blame for this, of course, but some who lean left, not my fair-minded co-hosts, of course, but some others, now they deny that Team Blue is participating in cancel culture. They even deny that it exists at all. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about one person, Lauren Hough. Lauren Hough is the author of Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing, a memoir and collection of essays about her life. Hough, who is gay, grew up in a Christian doomsday cult and later joined the military while Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in effect. The Lambda Literary Foundation, an organization for LGBTQ writers and readers, recently informed her that her book was a finalist for a Lammy Award, and she was thrilled. The Lambda Prize exists because when someone like me, which is to say a queer person, manages to publish a book with queer themes, those books are often ignored by mainstream prize committees, she wrote on Substack. Prizes get media attention, prizes create name recognition and bring in new readers, prizes sell books, prizes like the Lambda also come with a check. Good news for her, except it was not to be. So Lambda informed Hough that it had decided to withdraw her nomination due to, quote, the Twitter disputes last week. So sorry to pass this news along, wrote a representative for Lambda in an email to Hough. The Twitter disputes, according to Hough, refer to her defense of Sandra Newman, a young adult fiction novelist whose new book, The Men, concerns a dystopia where everyone with a Y chromosome vanishes from the earth. Newman had the audacity to describe her book as follows. The book is about women who can't let go of the men they've lost and devote their lives to getting them back. This premise ran afoul of certain transgender Twitter activists, since everyone with a Y chromosome is a category that includes not just men, but also transgender women, and the people left behind would be not just women, but also transgender men. Indeed, one such activist described Newman's plotting as, quote, transphobia and transmisogyny. The world of YA fiction includes a small contingent of extremely woke, social justice conscious early reviewers with tremendous power to sick the mob on books and authors who offend them for very slight reasons. It's a disturbing phenomenon that's been well documented by my friends Jesse Singal and Kat Rosenfield. This is as pure an example of cancel culture, really, as you can find. Now, Hough defended Newman, and for that, she is no longer up for a Lammy. When YA Twitter came for Sandra, someone who has always been there for me, I responded, she wrote. I told them to read the book before condemning it. I told them characters and plot don't necessarily reflect the politics and views of the author. I told them to read the effing book, or don't. I'd read the book. Sandra Newman sent it to me in an early form, and I gave her a few notes like we do for one another. I'm not transgender, and neither is Sandra. Sandra's non-binary. But we discussed how to make the book recognize the reality of transgender people. Other books that started from this premise, All the Men Disappear, have erased the existence of trans people, and it was important to her not to do that, to be as sensitive as possible. So when I saw people assuming that simple idea was the entirety of the plot, I told them to read the book before assuming the worst. For this, I was labeled a TERF, end quote. So a TERF, or trans-exclusionary radical feminist, is generally defined as a feminist who denies that trans women, who began their lives as biological males, are women. Neither Hough nor Newman describe themselves as holding that view, nor does it appear that either of their books promote that view. But a small number of people who purport to speak for the transgender community end up implicitly making the claim that even acknowledging differences, like the presence of a Y chromosome, between women and trans women, that's a form of bigotry. Lambda Literary exists to celebrate queer authors for telling stories about queer people, for helping to destigmatize the LGBT community. The irony is that in this case, the organization is participating in the social shaming of a queer author who invoked the anger, not of social conservatives, the hateful right wing, but of far-left activists. Sadly, this is not the first time that Lambda Literary has succumbed to such pressure. They also denominated a book by Alice Dreger, a historian and bioethicist, because Dreger has clashed with trans activists along similar lines. Lambda Literary did not respond to a request for comment from me, so I'll leave you with this from Hough. She writes, I'm a queer woman and I was silenced most of my life. I found my voice, but if my nomination is being withdrawn for using it, what the F is the point of Lambda Literary? So that's a good question. Here's another question. How can anyone possibly say that cancel culture is a made-up problem? I don't know, Ryan. How can they say it's made up? Like, this is textbook. And again, I don't want anyone to mistakenly think there are like millions of people calling for this award to be rescinded. She didn't
Right.
get
Millions of people
nomination.
don't know it exists.
There's like
Right.
6 people calling for it. 6 people on Twitter who are crazy, who say crazy things, who think that who basically think that even in fiction, if there are fictional characters doing things they don't like, even if within the fictional like world or story, that's supposed to be the bad guys and like they're being sexist or racist or something, but it's not an endorsement.
Right.
It's just there are characters. You're supposed to have bad characters for the good characters to overcome. They almost react even to that with suspicion.
Yeah.
And so this other author got attacked for this. Hoff defended her, and it's happened like this a million times.
Yeah, and the premise of this show is that, you've got somebody on the left, you've got somebody on the right, somebody's going to represent the left view here. There is no way that you could possibly contort the English language or any basic ethics to come up with anything that is remotely defensive of this idea. And it's true that it's just allowed 6 people, but it's the silence of everybody else that empowers those 6 people. So in some ways, it's not their fault. They're just the lunatics on the fringe who are out there shouting. All societies have always had lunatics on the fringe shouting. They don't get to dictate a social culture to everybody else unless everybody else is deathly afraid of them.
Exactly.
And just sits back. I heard somebody say recently that they thought that call-out culture was replacing bullying, and that now that bullying is no longer culturally acceptable, that it needs an expression somehow. And the way it expresses itself is through this call-out culture. And if that were true, then you would likely find the leading edge of it in the YA world. The young because that's where the bullies really are. And that's precisely where you find it. The other tragedy for this, beyond what's happening to Huff and beyond what's happening to Sandra here, is that this is being yoked around Democrats' necks, whether they like it or not, because of their silence and because Republicans are wisely weaponizing it against Democrats. And it's going to cost them significantly at the polls. So as a result, the multiracial working class that was pushing under Sanders and that wing of the party towards Medicare for all, towards a higher minimum wage, towards a more decent future for everybody, is now going to be undercut by this. Mm-hmm. And for what? So that you get to shame a non-binary person? And then her friend who tells you, her queer friend who tells you, I worked with this non-binary author to make sure that it was inclusive of trans people.
It's truly insane.
And for that, we're not going to get Medicare for all and a higher minimum wage, and oligarchs are going to come in and culturally weaponize it so that they can get their taxes lower.
And
awesome.
You're exactly right that it's on an organization like Lambda Literary to just ignore those
that.
6 people. Just
and
say,
denounce them.
Thank you for your whatever, but we're proud of this book.
Yes, they're the biggest. Denounce them. Right. If nobody stands up to them,
but they just
get more emboldened and more
organizations
emboldened,
like this just cave over and over and over again, which has created or allowed the cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, to take over our entire social awareness, because the organizations always cave. They never stand up.
Yeah, and pretending this isn't happening, ask Lauren Huff.
Yeah.
Like, she was up for an award. Now that opportunity is canceled. Yeah. Like, she doesn't have it anymore because of the culture around it. If you don't want to call that cancel culture, fine. You don't want to call it call-out culture. And they keep complaining about the name for it, because when there is actually a genuine stigma to something underneath it, the name continues to take on negative connotations. Nobody likes this crap. Nobody. And so whatever you call it will eventually take on a negative. They managed to take the term social justice and turn that into
a bad thing.
A bad thing.
Yep.
Maybe that's a sign that you're not on the side of social justice. Yep. Maybe you're just a bully.
Well, and I also want to thank Ryan for helping me put this one together, because Hoff actually had me blocked on Twitter. I assume not because we've ever had a negative interaction, but some Twitter users, it seems to be a particular category of liberals like to use these block bot things, whereas like a prearranged list of people who
block them all,
who have been who have been deemed problematic by stop using them if you're using them, because you end up innocent people like me get swept under the rug. Maybe I haven't been totally innocent at all times.
For them. Yeah.
But right, if you don't want to hear from me anymore, but Ryan, who was not blocked by her, got her to unblock me so I could see her interacting with some of these absolutely insane people.
And I promised her Robby would be on his very best behavior, and here he has been.
You're right. Here I am being on good behavior. And I'm looking forward to your radar coming up next.